Ian McLaren said this: "What does worrying do? It does not empty tomorrow of its sorrow, but it does empty today of its strength. It does not make you escape trouble. It makes you unfit to cope with it when it comes." So let me ask you this. How many of you struggle to believe that God will provide? How many of you struggle to believe God will provide? Because we're going to look at a miracle of provision today. And I'm thinking if there's one category of miracles we find ourselves praying for a lot, I'm guessing it's for miracles of provision. God, I need you to provide. But I think that universally we struggle to trust that. Because let's ask this, what are the questions when what are the results rather when we doubt that God will provide? What's at stake when we fail to truly believe that God will provide? Because I think what happens when we struggle to believe that that is the case, that we spend much of our lives being controlled by our circumstances. And if we don't believe God will provide, we're going to be people who grumble and complain every time there's a bump in the road, every time life gets a little bit difficult and something goes wrong. We're going to be people who are discontent, people who worry, maybe people who stay up late at night freaking out and in tears and even making ourselves sick at times, or we'll seek to control things. I believe much of the time when we control, our propensity to control details is because we're terrified that if we don't, we're not going to achieve the desired outcome that we're looking for. That's, to me, what's at stake when we fail to trust that God will provide. But guess what? That does not have to be the ebb and flow of our lives. Because God was and is and always will be Jehovah Jireh, the God who provides. It was manna in the wilderness, yes. And then he became the manna that literally was provided for us so that when he surrendered himself, we could be reconciled to God. And I happen to believe that if we can trust him, if you're in this room and you've given your life to Jesus Christ, you're a Christian now. That means you have trusted him with everything you needed spiritually. And if God can take care of that, why can't we trust him to meet our needs physically? And so today, if you have your Bibles, I'm going to ask you to turn to Exodus chapter 16. It's the story of God providing manna for his people. But if you've been following along, you know this is not the first time that God has provided for his people in the Exodus story. Right? He provides for them a leader named Moses, and he provides for them, he provides safety during the 10 plagues. For the last number of plagues that hit the Egyptians, it did not hit the Hebrew people. He provided freedom from the oppressive hand of Pharaoh. He provided, when he freed them, a pillar of fire and cloud to guide them. And when the Egyptian army was pressing them at the Red Sea, he provided deliverance for them there. But in Exodus chapter 16, he's going to provide in a different way. And they're hungry, and they're in the desert, and they might even be a little bit delusional at this point. But let's stop for a moment and pray together before we dig into the text. Father, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Exodus chapter 16, we're just going to start with the first 3 verses this morning. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the 2nd month after they come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "Man, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us into the desert to starve this entire nation." So these people, they seem a little bit dramatic at first glance, don't they? But they're hungry, and they're tired, and they're scared. This is all very new for them. And while Egypt was no picnic, it was no walk in the park, at least they knew what they could count on from day to day. But I want to hit the pause button on talking about the Israelite people for a minute, and I want to talk about God, about the provider. Because we see in these first few verses the first thing God provides for his people. And so today, if you're taking notes, we're going to talk about 3 provisions that God makes for his people. And the first is this: God provides wilderness. God provides wilderness. I know at first that seems a little bit odd to say, but God provided wilderness for them. At the end of chapter 15, they cross the Red Sea and they end up in this place called Elim, which is it's a little bit of an oasis, and there's palm trees there, and there's plenty of water and probably food to eat. But he has them leave that oasis and travel out into the wilderness, and they're there for 45 days. 45 days. That's a long time when you're hungry. That's a long time when you're hot. That's a long time when your body aches. That's a long time when you have young kids or elderly people that are traveling and all of your possessions. But that's exactly where God sends them. He provides wilderness. He sends them into the wilderness. And so how do the people respond? They start grumbling and complaining. They turn to Moses and Aaron and they're like, hey guys, get us out of here. I mean, why are we stuck in this place? Why is God treating us this way? Don't you think this God you're asking us to trust should hook us up just a little bit more? We're going to starve out here. And when I read this, I got to tell you, I don't instinctively give grace, a lot of grace to the Hebrew people. I mean, I'm thinking about the Hebrews, right? I'm like, you saw with your own eyes the plagues and how God saved you from the disaster that hit the Egyptians again and again. He saved you and he freed you from slavery so that you and your kids and your grandkids and the kids after them could not live in bondage. You would be free. And you saw this pillar of fire and smoke guide you. And then the Red Sea. Like, not only do you walk on dry ground, like that is a miracle in and of itself. Like the seas were parted and they walk and the ground is not sloshy and wet. It's dry ground. Like what? And Pharaoh's army is lost at sea. And oh, by the way, in Elim at the oasis, when the water was too bitter to drink, they threw in a stick and it made the water sweet so they could have all of the water they needed. And so I read this and I'm like, are you kidding me? After all that, you're going to complain. And I'm thinking to myself, like, who do they think they are? Like, who complains about being hungry? Who complains about stuff when things don't seem to go their way? Who complains about a leader who's not leading the way you think they should? Who complains about tough life circumstances even though they have God with them? Oh, wait, we do it all the time. And I started to think about some of the areas that I've caught myself complaining about lately. Like I this morning, I was up in the sound booth, I was just complaining about like being old and how it's hard and you don't always feel great, right? And I was saying, I was up in the sound booth and I was like, you know what? Like there are days where I wake up, because I'll be 50 this year. Eric Smedley was 50 yesterday. He's not here this morning, but he was 50 yesterday. Like there are days where I wake up and I'm like, man, I could climb Everest, right? Like, oh, ready right here I come. And there are days I feel like I fell off Everest, right? And so I feel like I complain. I'm starting to complain about that. Like, what is that? You don't complain. And traffic, right? We complain a lot about traffic in this area. On Monday, I had to go to Maryland, and I had to get on 66, and then 495, and then 270. That's like the trifecta from hell. Like, you don't ever want to do all of those together, but I had to get on those high, and I'm like complaining about like this car in front of me, and not just the traffic. I find myself complaining about the way people drive in this area. Like, the only place in the world I've ever seen this was in Quebec, where my father grew up. We'd go to visit our relatives, and we'd go into these cities, and they figured it out. And we can actually start a revolution this morning if you actually try what I'm about to do. So it's the only place in the world where you're at a red light, right? Maybe you're 8 cars deep, so there's 7 cars in front of you. What happens in that magnificent place on earth, in paradise, is when the light turns from red to green, slowly, every car that's at the light begins accelerating at the same time. And they all move through the intersection. Not here. Here, your car 8, and you're praying because you know this, I'm going to have to say, because what happens here is you're at the light, right? You're 8 cars deep, and the light turns from red to green, and the first car waits a few seconds and then goes. And then the second car's like, oh, it's my turn, I guess, and then they go. And then the third car's like, oh, okay, I guess I can go now. And then a couple seconds later, they start going. 4 cars go through, and you're like, what is the deal? And so I find myself sometimes complaining about the weirdest, lamest things. I know this because I was at a light a few weeks ago, and I'm like, and it turned from like red to green to red to green again. And when it was green again, I was waiting to go, and the car in front of me wasn't going. I was like, what are you doing? And then before I could say it, Salsa and Luna in the back were like, come on and go, car. Yeah. That's not a good thing. We complain. I found myself complaining a while ago that we don't get to take a lot of family vacations, right? And we don't. As a family, we've been on one as our family. It was to Orlando Disney 2 years ago, SeaWorld, Epcot, Universal. It was awesome, and it was all at the expense of Make-A-Wish, which was even better because we didn't have to spend our money. And this was so cool because I had never in my life been to Disney World. This is family. So I'd never in my whole life. I'd be in school, and kids would come back from Christmas break or summer break, and teacher would be like, "Hey, what did you guys do?" Like, boom, I went to Disney, and I never ever got to go. My whole life, I knew what the Disney castle looked like because I had seen it at the beginning of Disney movies, but I always just kind of wondered what it would like to be there. I'll never forget it, because let's be honest, of all the parks, Disney is the worst. It really is. Compared to the other parks, it's terrible. And so, but I'm no joke, I get off. I know there's like people here that like live for Disney. I see you guys back there. So I get off, I get out of the car, and we walk, and we're heading towards like Disney World and that park. And I come around the corner, and then there is the castle. I start crying like a baby, just bawling, right? But you know, the best part of that trip was this. So when we went to Universal, when we went to all these parks, we had not speed passes, front of the line passes, right, for the Make-A-Wish kids, which meant this, and this was the week to do it because it was Florida spring break. So every young adult on earth was at the parks that week. And so when we went, for example, to ride the Velocicoaster, put your hands up if you've ridden that coaster. Thank you. It's the best coaster on earth. So the posted wait time on the Velocicoaster was 3 hours. Every spring break student, they were all there, right? So here's how it worked, because we had the speed passes, not speed passes, front of the line passes. We'd walk up to the front of the line, and they'd say, go over there. And they'd go over, we'd walk to the exit of the ride, and somebody would meet us and walk us up the back way, and we would be on the ride in 5 minutes, every single ride. If you want to travel, you can take one of my kids, apply for Make-A-Wish, and but I'm telling you, it was the way. So listen, I remember we get up there 5 minutes, we're on the Velocicoaster, right? And it was awesome. We get off the isn't that great? Oh, man. Yeah, I get chills thinking about it. So we get up there at one point, and we get off the coaster after we'd just ridden it, right? And you think these other people waiting to get on have been there and we're like, can we ride it again? They're like, oh, yeah. You want to see the look of ultimate suffering. Was when those people saw us get on the ride again. But I was complaining the other day to someone about not going on vacations, and I got family getting married, cousins, nieces, all that kind of stuff, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to go. And I was complaining, and I remember praying to God and saying, God, why can't I do more of these things? Is this how you provide for my family's life? I get one vacation with it, that's it? Do you know how humiliating it was to read this text and realize the Hebrews hadn't been on a vacation their whole lives? 430 years where they were slaves and beaten and mistreated and not knowing where their next meal was going to come from. And I'm complaining about a vacation? Oh, please. I think we could cut them a little bit of slack for their complaining. But we go through tough seasons all the time, don't we? If you and I are being honest. I have a friend who's going through a rough time right now, and their kids have been sick, and then they're dealing with her parents that are now, they have medical issues, and they're trying to take care of both generations, and it's difficult, and they have this one kid with developmental issues, and so they're like, I'll never know if we're going to ever get the empty nest syndrome, and I'm listening to them, and I'm realizing they're in the wilderness right now. So my question for you is this: what is your wilderness? What's the thing you are going through that maybe you look at it and it makes no sense? God, why am I having to go through this? And you see no end in sight. What's the one thing in your life right now that you're praying, God, just make it go away. Take this away right now. Maybe it's, God, heal this disease. Maybe it's, God, why can't we just get pregnant like everybody else? We get one kid, that's it. Miscarriage after miscarriage. That family's got 5. And they're not even good kids. But one is all we get? Come on, God. Maybe it's, God, I have a master's degree. and all the experience in the world. Why are there no good jobs waiting for me? I just get this one dead-end job that has no real future in it. God, maybe it's why does my body hurt every single day? Or maybe it's, God, why do I have to fight these mental health issues and this depression and sadness that's always there? I asked if I could share this morning. Chad and Michelle are awesome. And so they're expecting their first child, which is awesome. But recently, just it's been tough for them financially. And they're both working and trying to make ends meet, but they lost the place that they were living in. And so they had to move in with her parents. And now they're having to figure out, okay, how are we going to make this place our own when we bring this with child into the world? And for the last while, it's been just really difficult. And they don't want pity and they don't want any of that. And they don't even complain about it. That's the cool thing. But they're in the wilderness. What is your wilderness? What is your wilderness? I don't know if you picked up on it, but in verse 3, the Israelites say to Moses, it's kind of weird, right? If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. Pots of meat? Really? That was your life in Egypt? Sitting around all day with a Super Bowl spread of food, ribs and wings and nachos and pots of chili. No, you were not. You were slaves. Life was terrible. You were crying out to God, get us out of here. But what are they doing? They're romanticizing the past, right? Ever find yourself doing that? I know I have. Maybe you're like, wow, life was much better with my old job. I had the perfect boss. The hours were great. The pay was great. Listen, that's how you remember it when? When your current job is wearing you out. That's not the way it was. It wasn't perfect. You left that job. We call them the good old days, but a lot of times the truth of the matter is they weren't nearly as good as we remember them. For you, maybe it was the place you lived. Man, if we could only go back and live there again. The town was perfect. The weather was perfect. The friends were perfect. The church they attended, their pastor was perfect. No, he was not. But I'm here to say, it's easy, right? To look back and think, man, it was so much better. And the fact is, a lot of times, because you're in the wilderness, you're misremembering. It's easy to do that when you're in a wilderness, to romanticize the past, to wish for a better future, to say to yourself, man, if the circumstances would just simply change, my life could be great again. The grass is always greener. So what is your wilderness? Because you have to remember, God provided wilderness for them. He sent them out into the wilderness, but there's a second thing God provides for them while they're in the wilderness, and it's in a very specific way. God provides enough. This is interesting to me when they cry out to God, how he responds. How he responds, by the way, is no small detail. So let's go to the text. Exodus chapter 16 again. Verse 4 says this, Then the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather, you can underline it there, enough for that day. In this way, I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. Jump down to verse 11. It says this, Then the Lord said to Moses, I've heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the mornings you will be filled with bread. Then they will know I am the Lord, your God. And that evening quail came and covered the camp. And in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, what is that? For they didn't even know what it was. Moses said to them, it is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Each of you is to gather as much as he needs. Enough. Take an omer for each person you have in your tent. The Israelites did as they were told. Some gathered much, some little. And when they measured it by the omer, he who gathered much did not have too much. They had what? Enough. And he who gathered little did not have too little. Each one gathered as much as he needed. They had enough. Just enough. Then Moses said, no one is to keep any of it until morning. However, some of them paid no attention to Moses. They kept part of it until morning, but when they woke up, it was filled with maggots, began to smell. So Moses was once again angry with the people. Each morning, everyone gathered as much as he needed, enough. And when the sun grew hot, it melted away. So what does God do? He solves their hunger problem. Quail in the evenings, bread in the mornings. But how does he provide it? He provides exactly what they need that day. He provides enough. He didn't have to do that, right? I mean, he could have told Moses, right? Hey, build like this traveling storehouse, and we can take all the extra, and as we're traveling, it'll be in there so people will see it and know, oh, yeah, my kids will have food for tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. He's God. He could have done that. He's God. He could have just made it so that their bellies automatically didn't need food anymore. He could have solved that problem anyway, so people didn't have to stress and people didn't have to worry. Instead, he gives them a test. He's going to see what they do when he gives them a specific command, and the command was collect enough for today. I do this with my kids from time to time. Years ago, I wanted to see if Dryden and Soleil could obey a specific command. And so we had people coming over that night, and they were sitting on the couch watching a show, and there was a coffee table in the middle of the room, and I put 2 bowls there, and I filled one with M&Ms, and I filled one with Skittles. And I told the kids, I said, don't touch the M&Ms, don't touch the Skittles. These are for the people coming over later. However, I said, they're not going to eat all of them. And so when they leave, you can have what's left over. Right? And their eyes lit up. Are you serious? We get the rest? And they're like, yeah. And then I walked out of the room. And I stopped when I was around the corner to listen to the conversation, and it started with Soleil. We got to eat some now. There will be none left over. And Dryden's like, no, Papa said trust. We can wait. We'll get some at the very end. He's like, and Dryden's like, Dryden, think about it. This is like a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. If you had these for you and were told you could eat them, would you leave any for anybody else after? She's like, oh, no. Let's eat it. And so all of a sudden they start diving into the M&Ms and the Skittles, and the Israelites wake up in the morning, and the ground is covered with manna. And they have the command. How do they respond? Some of them fail the test. They disobey God. Instead, they respond not by obeying, not by trusting God. There's a hymn we used to sing in church growing up, number 221, trust and obey. And it said, trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Listen, friends, obeying God is how you show that you trust God. Obeying God is how you show that you trust God. Instead, they disobey, and they begin to worry, and like, what do I gather all this for today? And then we wake up tomorrow, and there's no more on the ground. What are we going to do then? And they get anxious because they wonder if God's going to come through for them this time, which makes me wonder, after all God has done for them in the past, how could they not trust God to deliver now? But if we stop and we think about our own wilderness experiences, who of us in this room, when facing uncertain times, have not stressed, have not worried, have not, like the Israelites do, taken matters into their own hands and somehow make a situation even worse and make an even bigger mess out of it because we don't trust that God will provide? God provides manna, and we respond by worrying, and we respond by controlling. Let me ask you this. What would happen, do you think, if God were to provide for you everything you wanted exactly when you wanted it? What would happen? What if he just zapped you out of your wilderness experience and gave you exactly what you wanted? I mean, I think you'd be grateful. I think you'd say, thank you, God, that was awesome. You rock. But what about like a month down the road? Or a year down the road, or 2 years down the road? Would you still be on your knees? Would you still see how much you need and have to depend on God for everything? If we all got exactly what we wanted in this life, exactly when we wanted, I don't think we'd be extra thankful. I think we'd be extra selfish. I think we'd be extra self-reliant. I think we'd be extra entitled. God, you owe me. You have to. Pastor Jeff Harris had this great quote on this, and he said this: the right thing at the wrong time is the wrong thing. The right thing at the wrong time is the wrong thing. That's a tough pill to swallow because there are wilderness experiences in our lives that God could seemingly change in an instant. He could snap his finger and the problem goes away forever, but he doesn't. Instead, what he provides for us is enough. Enough. Enough for this moment, and in so doing, it's a test. Why? Because he provides for us a process for our hearts to be changed and our minds to be changed, for us to become rewired so that we are totally dependent on him. Because that's ultimately what God provides, right? I mean, God provides wilderness, yes. And that's not always easy, but he does. And God provides enough, right? He supplies us with what we need today. He doesn't give us everything we want. Jackson Brown Jr. said, I've learned that if you give a pig and a boy everything you want, you get a good pig and a bad boy. That's why Jesus, when he prayed, said what? When he talked about needs, God, give us today our daily bread. God, when it comes to what I need, give me enough. And he did that to show them what? That when it comes down to it, God provides himself. God provides himself. It's interesting, the name the Hebrew people gave the bread that immediately and miraculously appeared on the ground was the reaction they had when they saw it. Like they called the bread, what is it? It was beyond their comprehension because the God who provided it was beyond their comprehension. Exodus 16, look at the text. Start reading at verse 32 if you have it. It says this. It says, this is so cool. Moses said, this is what the Lord has commanded. He says this to Moses and Aaron. Take an omer of manna and keep it for the generations to come so that they can see the bread I gave to you in the desert when I brought you out of Egypt. And so Moses said to Aaron, take a jar, put an omer of manna in it, and then place it before the Lord to be kept for generations to come. And as the Lord commanded Moses, Aaron put the manna in front of the testimony that it might be kept. So God tells Moses, keep one omer of, what is it, and place it in a jar to be kept as a reminder. To remind them of what? This is the bread I gave you to eat in the desert when I brought you out of Egypt. It was God they were to remember. He provided them himself. And wasn't that, by the way, their greatest need? To know God? I mean, he needed his people to know that bread wasn't their greatest need, and meat wasn't their greatest need, and water wasn't their greatest need, that God was their greatest need. So he provided manna in the desert in a manner so that they would come to know him and see and believe what I truly need is not the food I eat, but the God who provides it. He made them dependent on him. He made them dependent on him. There's a story about a young man who came to Socrates asking for knowledge. And so this young man walks up to the impressive, muscular-bound philosopher and said, "Oh, great Socrates, I come to you for knowledge." Well, Socrates could recognize a pompous, know-it-all numbskull when he saw one. And so Socrates led the young man through the streets on the edge of town, down the embankment, into the water, till they were standing up to their chest in water. And then he asked the young man again, what is it that you want, young man? "Oh, knowledge, oh great Socrates, I want knowledge," said the young man with a smile. And then Socrates took the young man and put his hands on his shoulders and pushed him and held him under the water. For not 10, not 20, about 30 seconds, then Socrates let him up and then looked at the young man and said, "What is it again that you want?" And the young man said, "Knowledge, O great and wise Socrates, I want knowledge." And then Socrates pushed him under the water a second time. 30 seconds pass, 35 seconds pass, 40 seconds go by, and finally Socrates lets him up, and the man was gasping. And Socrates says, "What is it you want?" Between heavy, deep breath, the young man wheezed, "Oh, knowledge, oh wise," and boom, before he could even get the words out of his mouth, Socrates put him under the water a third time. This time not for 40 seconds or 50 seconds, but 60 seconds, well over a minute. And finally, Socrates releases his grip, and the young man surged up out of the water. And Socrates asked him again, "What is it you want?" "Air!" the young man said, "I need air." To which Socrates replied, "When you want knowledge, as much as you've just wanted air, then you will have knowledge." I believe that's exactly the test God gave the Hebrew people in the wilderness. When you want me as much or more than you want food, then and only then will you have me. And for you and I, it's the same question before us today. Like, how desperate are you for God? Because he, not water, not food, not shelter, not clothing, he is our greatest need. That's why he sent Jesus. You know, in John chapter 6, Jesus was asked about our greatest need, and he had this great conversation when the crowds were gathered and they were wondering what in the world is important. Jesus brought up the manna experience all those years ago from back in the wilderness. If you have your Bibles, John chapter 6, starting at verse 25, says this. Jesus, when they found him on the other side of the lake, they asked Jesus, Rabbi, when did you get here? And Jesus said, I tell you the truth. You are looking for me, not because you saw miraculous signs, but because you ate the loaves and you had your fill. They were still after the physical food. They wanted their bellies filled, just like the Hebrews in the Old Testament. Do not work for food that spoils, Jesus said, but food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. On him, God the Father has placed his seal of approval. And they asked him, well, what must we do to do the work that God requires? And Jesus said, the work of God is this, to believe in the one he has sent. So they asked him, what miraculous sign then will you give us that we can see and believe? What will you do? Our forefathers ate manna in the desert. As it is written, he gave them manna from heaven to eat, bread from heaven. Jesus said to them, I tell you the truth. It is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Sir, they said, from now on, give us this bread. Then Jesus said these words, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Jesus said, I am your greatest need. I am what you should crave. I am what you can't live without. Listen, God provides us wilderness. Yes, and it's unpleasant at times, but that wilderness, if we allow it to, will lead us to a greater desperation for God. And in that wilderness, God provides enough. He meets our needs, but in such a way that we have a greater dependency on God. And God provides himself because he, not the stuff we think we need, he is our greatest need. And in Jesus and through Jesus, the bread of life, that need is met, fully met, once and for all met in him. And I think appropriately, we're going to celebrate the Lord's Supper this morning. And we're going to celebrate the true bread of life that was God's ultimate provision for us. Will you pray with me? Father in heaven, we thank you that you are Jehovah Jireh, the God who provides. And not just bread, and not just a job, not just a transportation mode for us to get around in. You don't just provide for us physically. You provided for us in the most unbelievable way of all. You gave yourself. You gave yourself. You are the bread of life. You are what sustains us. You are what we truly need. And so we come today, Father, to gather around the table, to thank you for what you provided.